Ten Commandments, while they are the foundation for an old covenant, they give us a window into the heart of God. They tell us something of his priorities, the things that are things that he elevates and are important to him. And they form the foundation for discipleship in the new covenant. They give us a starting point for how we are to be followers of Jesus Christ. This morning we are at commandment number 8, if any of you are keeping track. And we are looking at that commandment to not steal and a message titled, God Cares About People's Stuff. Now, I suspect that I grew up in a home that was more sensitive to this area of theft than most of yours. My dad worked for Canadian Pacific for most of his life, and his starting point with Canadian Pacific, they gave him a flashlight and a gun and sent him to Toronto Yard to walk up and down between the boxcars on the midnight shift looking for thieves. He went from there to working security, investigating thefts and robberies and break-ins at Royal York, which is at the time owned by Canadian Pacific. And then he served as a detective where he would investigate the theft of freight and various robberies related to Canadian Pacific lands and property. If you would invite my father over for a party or a get-together at your home when I was growing up, he would often find an opportunity to make his way out into your backyard. And you might have thought, he seems to have a great interest in landscaping. But what he was actually doing was looking, if you had any thick wooden borders to your garden, he would just casually look at the sides of them for any railway markings. And he would tell me, you'd be surprised how often these things are stolen, these railway ties. And I just kept thinking, it's only a matter of time before one of my friend's parents gets arrested by my dad. And I just it's uncomfortable, you know? And so I kind of grew up with this. Theft is high alert. It's on the radar. It's something that, in our home, we're always thinking about. And that's unusual. But I think that all of us have some sensitivity to this whole area of theft. If you have ever had a wallet pickpocketed from you on vacation, if you have ever had a car stolen, if your home is ever broken into, we've had a couple of those. If you've ever experienced that, it means a lot. It's important. It bothers you, right? Have you ever stopped to think about why it's so important? Or why is it important to God? Why would it make it into the top 10? You would think that God would be more concerned with important things like prayer and forgiveness. Why does he care about people's stuff? What does it matter that a little bit of things that we have would be taken from us? Well, theft matters to God, and it actually matters to us because it strikes at the heart of what it means to be human. In Genesis 2, when God created Adam and Eve, he put them in the garden, and he charged them to work the ground and with the knowledge that they would enjoy its fruit. Theft strikes at undermines the first and takes from us the second. It gets in the way of this calling that we have. If you've had your car stolen, you have been robbed of something that you've been called to manage, and you've been robbed of the fruit of what you have earned. And we feel that loss. We feel it not just as stuff that's gone, but something more fundamental to who we are and what we have been called to do. And so it matters to God, it matters to us. And so we want to just unpack that this morning. Again, it's the 8th commandment. We've been walking through Exodus chapter 20. We come to verse 15 and it just says, you shall not steal. So this morning what we're going to do is we're going to unpack what it means, what it is teaching us to avoid, what it is calling us to seek, and how we get there, how we actually bring change in this area of our life. So we'll start with what it's commanding us to avoid. And at its heart, the Eighth Commandment is warning us to stop being takers. The fact that we want more, and there is in most of us, yeah, I'd like some more, that doesn't give us permission to take from the work of others. So God calls us to stop being takers. Now, when I say stealing, and when you read stealing here, you're probably thinking of what I'm going to call blue-collar theft. And so we'll start there. The word for stealing in Exodus 20:15 literally means to carry something away. And so it would cover the full range of obvious thefts that you might think of. It would cover burglary, robbery, shoplifting, hijacking. It would cover pickpocketing and purse snatching. And this wasn't, unlike some of the other commandments, this one wasn't new or unique to Israel. Almost every ancient Near Eastern society had its laws against stealing. Interestingly, with this commandment, it was often more gentle and more direct in its punishment. Other ancient Near Eastern societies often would have the death penalty for stealing, particularly something of significance. But in the Old Covenant, it is always restitution. You take something, you need to pay back and pay back in a bigger way. So for instance, if you stole someone's ox, you would be required to return 5 oxen. If you took someone's sheep, you would have to return 4 more. The only exception to this is when you stole someone themselves for slavery. Often you'll hear in contemporary circles, oh yeah, why doesn't the Bible speak to slavery? It did. In fact, it spoke very directly to this. If you were to steal someone for the purpose of slavery, not only the person who was the trafficker, but also the one receiving the person as a slave, they were both given the death penalty. Their lives were ended because it was of so much greater significance. To draw someone into slavery is to rob them more than just their stuff. It was to rob them of their dignity and their freedom as well. And God said, we will not have that among our people. This will not be a thing in Israel. Now, most of you probably aren't engaged in those kinds of blue-collar crimes. Maybe you've been tempted in the past. Maybe it is something that you struggle with. But most of you are probably not given to those kinds of areas of theft. But you probably are tempted by some form of white-collar theft. So let me give it some examples. Leviticus 19, for instance, it says that holding the wages of a worker who is expecting to be paid was seen as a form of robbery. If you could pay them today, but you decide, I'm going to kind of hold on to that money. I don't need to do that. I'll put them off. I'll hold on to the money because it's more convenient for me to do so. The Bible spoke out against that, warned against the dangers of that, and had consequences for doing so. God also repeatedly in the Old Testament condemns merchants who used false measures. They would have one scale for if you wanted to buy something, but if they were selling, they would use a different scale, and they would come up with ways to cheat in their conducting of business. And so there were various kinds of what I'll call white-collar crime that were included in this whole area of theft. Today, we have obviously all kinds of ways in which we cheat in very sophisticated ways. Insurance fraud, claiming things that you don't really need to claim. I serve on the condo board for our townhouses. We see people making claims for things, wanting things repaired that really aren't broken in some cases, and just wanting to get the money. They estimate in Canada, insurance fraud costs an estimated $1 billion each year. And that means we pay for all of that. They're stealing from all of us because we all pay higher premiums. Tax evasion. not paying your full taxes, not claiming everything that you should claim, not declaring everything that you should declare. That accounts for, in Canada, as high as $50 billion a year. And some of you are thinking, it's just the government, it doesn't matter. No, we're all paying. You're robbing from all the people who do pay their taxes faithfully. How about employee theft? It costs another $1.4 billion a year in Canada. Raising our prices, making it more difficult because people are taking home things that they don't belong to them, that will just see this as, just a big company, they'd owe me, and everybody's got their reason, but will excuse different kinds of theft. And that doesn't even touch on the way that employees abuse sick days or claim personal time as company time or spend their day scrolling at work when they should be working. I need to confess that I am guilty of white-collar crime. I started in this when I was in grade 7, middle school, grade 7 or 8. It was one of my first jobs. I got a job. A friend and I were hired by a local realtor to deliver these little cards in the neighborhood to advertise their services. And I remember when he hired me, he said, the last guy I had, he took the stack of cards, threw them into the ravine, and told me he'd delivered them and expected to get paid. And even at 13, I knew that was really amateur. I mean, if you're going to try and pull something off, that's not the way to do it. And so I thought I was a lot smarter than that. So what I would do is I would faithfully deliver the cards 2 at a time. I put 2 in every box. That way I could double my pay. And if he ever found out, I would just claim, well, they stuck together. I couldn't help it. I didn't know. And yet I was breaking the Eighth Commandment. I was stealing from my employer, trying to do less and get more. And so we just want to pause here and ask, are there ways that you are taking from the people around you, taking from your the place of where you work? Are there ways that you are robbing your employer of what you owe them? Do you pay contractors cash so you can avoid paying the tax? Like, how much does that cost us as a country, as a people? Do you steal a bit of someone else's labor to give you a little bit more? Are there ways that you reflect, I'm really a taker in this relationship. I don't really give anything into it. It's all about me and what I can get, not about them and what I can offer. So the eighth commandment calls all of us to examine our hearts for ways that we might be takers, that we might be stealing, and warns us to stop it. But how do you know that you've done that? How do you know that you're no longer a thief? I mean, I had this, I'm confessing middle school. This is me, this is kind of at the heart of who I am. And I thought, boy, how do you know that you've kind of been moved on from that? It's like the children's joke, the one, when is a door not a door? When it's a jar, right? Yeah. So when is a thief not a thief? So that according to the Bible, it's not it's not just when you stop stealing. It's when you start giving. And really, this eighth commandment is not just negative. And in fact, we've seen this with the 10 Commandments. It's seldom just talking about what not to do. It's often pointing us in the other direction, having us to reflect on in this case, our generosity. Are we givers? Are we those who invest of ourselves into the people around us, the relationships, and the opportunities that God would give? The eighth commandment is a call to start being a giver. Now listen how the Apostle Paul reflects on this commandment in Ephesians 4:28. He says, "Let the thief no longer steal," that's the bare bones of the commandment, "but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he might have a lot of money and be able to, enjoy it." No, he says, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. He's saying, don't just not take from someone. No, invest yourself in hard work, not just about you, not just so you can get more, not just so that you can be really comfortable. No, invest yourself in hard work, earn money so that you can be generous, so that you have something to give to others, so that you can see him glorified through your resources. When I was a kid, putting 2 cards into every mailbox as one of my first jobs, I was just thinking about myself. It was all about me. It was about my comfort. It was about me trying to get something more by doing something less. And I had no thought whatsoever to the well-being of the person that I worked for. Hardworking man who was just trying to provide for his family and to grow his business. It was all about me. Turning from that mentality involves, according to this verse, a complete change in mind. Every aspect of what I was going through my mind was wrong-spirited. Now I'm to embrace work. Like looking for shortcuts was my first mistake. Now it's calling me to work hard, to give myself to whatever I have been called to do, to give myself to it, and it's to be an honest work where I'm not cheating other people, where I'm not looking for ways to kind of get out of it, but instead to be wholehearted, to be fully invested. Before, my goal was, how can I get more? How can I just get some money for me? Now, it's supposed to be more than that. Yes, my job is to provide for my needs, but I am to work to give myself to it so that I can be generous, so that I can give to someone who has less. And to focus and to direct my energies in those ways. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." That it is in that being able to share with others, being able to give generously to needs, to be able to respond, to put God first in these things and see him glorified in all that you give. And many Christians never experience this. They never get this sense of having moved on from not just stealing to actually embracing the joy and the blessing of giving. And it robs them of the satisfaction that work can bring. I read a terrible example this week from James Emery White. He had visited where I think that some of you have visited this place. It's the Eagle and Child Pub in Oxford, England. It was the famous gathering place for a group called the Inklings. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, and other writers would gather there to discuss, to talk, and to bat around new ideas. And it is famous people that admire them. And so James Emery White was in the area, took a visit to the pub and wanted to see it. And he was sitting and couldn't help but overhear the manager of the pub. And the manager of the pub was saying some things that were expressions of his anger at the bloody Christians. And he was expressing his anger at the bloody Christians because they were once again stealing his menus as souvenirs. In fact, he has, had invested in some quite expensive, well-made, well-produced menus of the pub, and he's just people would take them all the time because they wanted to have some memento of the place where C.S. Lewis and Tolkien gathered for these meetings. He even made a stack of the same menus, but just a cheap replica that people could take away for free. He had a stack of them by the register. Go ahead and take them. He said, people still take the expensive ones. And so White started speaking with the manager. He was beside himself. How could this be? And then he said, how come they don't take the more expensive? You've got some real memorabilia on the walls around here. You've got handwritten letters by C.S. Lewis. You've got plaques. You've got these things. Why don't they take those? And the manager said, oh, those aren't real. They're just copies. And he said, they still get taken though. I'd never put the real ones up. And I'm just thinking, how is it that people could be so moved by the Christian testimony and teachings of a person like C.S. Lewis, go to the trouble of traveling all of the way to this pub to celebrate the impact of his life, and steal from a hardworking pub manager in order to make that take place? Where is the disconnect there? What has happened in that person's life that they don't see the connection between one and the other? One of the things that the Bible gives is giving as a way to cure us of this tendency that we have for stealing, to focus us on being a giving and generous people, that we don't fall back into ways of taking and selfishness. Giving God the first of all that we earn is how we acknowledge that he has authority over all of it. And it's why in Scripture he charges us with robbery when we don't honor him with the first. In Malachi 3:8, God famously asks, will man rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how have we robbed you? And then he says, in your tithes and contributions. They were cheap toward God. They thought of him little in the management of their finances. They didn't put him first, didn't give him the first 10%, and as a result, he felt what they were communicating. By giving him the leftovers, they were saying to him, you're kind of at the bottom of the heap in terms of where we see life and our priorities. And he said, I feel that. Message received. Now, our accountant at Grace tells us that people who attend regularly give, less than half of the people who attend regularly give anything at all to Grace Baptist Church. Of those who do give, only half of them give what could be considered, even generously considered, a tithe. And for people who are new to the church and new to the faith, that makes sense, frankly. God is a giver, not a taker. And he wants people to feel the fullness of his grace. And that's how he leads. That's how he walks into our lives. He comes giving. He comes with the fullness of his grace. But that grace is intended and designed to change us. We are not supposed to be moved by the testimony of C.S. Lewis and think, oh, I'll go steal something as a way of marking and memorializing the work of God in my life through him. No, that grace is intended to change us, to heal us of our taking tendencies, and to create in us a giving spirit. That's what it's intended to do. He wants you to see that it really is more blessed to give than to receive. So we ask ourselves, am I still a taker? Is that still a problem for me? Is church only about what you can get? Or how about your family? Would, how about those relationships of people close to you? Would people describe you as a taker? Do people see you as someone who is generous, who is looking for needs, looking for ways to respond to the people around you, to the needs that God presents to you? Would the people in your life describe you as generous? Is it still mostly about you? Are you a taker or are you a giver? God calls us to be generous with our money, with our time, with the resources He's provided, the talents that He's given us. He wants us to be a giving people. Now, maybe the conclusion as you ask those questions is there are still some ways that you're breaking the Eighth Commandment. You haven't been accused of any crimes recently, but you know your heart, it's still the thirst for more and the hunger to take still is too big of an issue in your life. And if that's so, I want to offer you the hope that is in Jesus Christ. His grace is what can change us. You can be a giver, not a taker, because of Jesus. And I want to show you a few of the things that I've experienced in this area. Again, I'm the guy, 2 cards, every mailbox, double my pay, half the work. As I reflect on how God began to change me in this area, a big part of the healing process was about trust. I know the selfishness of my heart, and I knew that somebody just telling me to be generous was not going to bring about much change in me. What did begin to bring change was verses like John 10:10. It calls Satan the ultimate taker. It's interesting, the title he gives for him here. But Jesus, speaking in John 10:10, says, "The thief," referring to Satan, "comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly." And so he is saying that there are these opposing forces in this world, one coming to rob us of our humanity, rob us of our dignity, rob us of life's fullness, rob us of what we are intended to enter into. And another, Jesus, coming into our lives, seeking to bless us, seeking to bring fullness into our lives. Satan wants to reduce us to something that is selfish, focused on myself, ignorant to the needs around me, and ultimately not experiencing the blessing of giving or the blessings of God. And he had succeeded in my life. So much so that I was defensive toward God, defensive toward anything that might have touched on my kind of me-focused attitude. But as I experienced the life and freedom that Jesus was leading me into in other areas, I began to trust him in other areas as well. The idea of giving to others and giving back to God began to feel like something that even I could do. It began to be one more step in that process of healing from this person that I no longer wanted to be to this person that I felt God calling me to. I experienced the blessing of giving and marveled at how much Jesus gave for me. The truth of a verse like 2 Corinthians 8:9 began to sink in, where it says, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich." He gave up heaven. He gave up all of the worship of the angelic host. He gave up comfortable. He gave up secure. He gave up safety. Ultimately, he gave up his life so that we could experience the riches of his grace. And that began to make my defensiveness feel very petty. That for me to resist, to trust, refuse to trust him in this area when he had entered into such sacrifice and to endured so much on my behalf, just felt very small all of a sudden. And I finally began to understand the change that took place in Zacchaeus' life. Zacchaeus, if you heard his story in Sunday school growing up, you heard that he was a wee little man. They have this story of, and everyone's thought of, it's such a great story because he's short, can't see above the crowds, and children relate to that. He climbs up the tree, and those are all, those are parts of the story. Those are good. But Zacchaeus was the ultimate taker. He was so captivated by greed that he would sell his soul. He would give of himself that he could carry out extortion for Rome. He would use the power and the authority that he had by force to steal from his fellow Jews. Collecting taxes, that part's okay, but then above and beyond that, to take whatever he needed, that he might get rich at the expense of others who would be made poor. He was the ultimate taker, and people hated him for it. When it says that he's small, it feels to me that he's not just describing his stature, but just seeing how the greed had reduced him to a shell of a man. He was a little person. There wasn't much left of him. And yet, while everyone hated him as he bore the shame of what he was doing and what it took for him to get more, Jesus saw in him someone who was yearning for something different. Someone who was longing for forgiveness, who was seeking acceptance. Someone who wanted to be set free. And so while the crowd would have dismissed him for even being near Jesus, Jesus comes to him and says, "I'm staying at your place tonight. I want to be with you." And even as he's saying that, there are people in the crowd who are saying, doesn't he know who this person is? What kind of an idiot prophet could he be? And Jesus wants to stay with him anyway. We only have one sentence in all the Bible that Zacchaeus gets to speak. Only one thing that he says. And Luke records his response in Luke 19:8. He says, Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." The grace of God made a giver out of a taker. Jesus, looking into his eyes, seeing what he needed, pouring his grace and acceptance through that invitation, stirred in him something that he didn't think was there. In receiving the grace of God, he welled up in a desire on one hand for restitution and on the other for generosity. And God's grace continues to do that. I read an account of this just this last week, a story from Cairo in Egypt. Some of you know that there are thousands of what are known as Zabaleen, who they set out from a district in Cairo known as Garbage City. They are thousands who go out collecting garbage. They, in fact, collect 1/4 of the city's garbage. And this is in a city, Cairo's got like 23 million people now. And so 1/4 of their garbage is collected by the Zabaleen, and they're 90% Christian. Well, they're not 90% Christian. 90% of them are Christians, to be clear. They're not just kind of partway along the way to Christianity. No, 90% of the Zabaleen are Christians, but they are dirt poor. They collect the city's garbage. They bring it back, 90% of it, they are able to recycle it and they live off it. But, I mean, they are living in terrible conditions. It is the slum district of Cairo. Well, one day in 1972, a young Egyptian businessman lost, at the time, his $11,000 watch. And he assumed it's gone. I don't know if any of you have ever kind of dropped something into the garbage and it's like, oh no, the garbage is gone, and you're like, oh my goodness, like I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's gone. It's lost forever. And so he just assumed it's lost forever. An old garbage collector, one of the Zebulun, comes across this watch in the garbage. $11,000 in 1972 to a Zebulun was a fortune. But his faith wouldn't let him take it. But what are you going to do? It's, I've got 23 million people in Cairo. It could have been from anyone. He looks at the watch and he sees this young businessman has engraved it with his name on it. Takes the watch, finds the man, returns it to him, and gives glory to Christ. Later, the businessman spoke with a reporter, and he says, I didn't know Christ at the time, but I told the man that I saw Christ in him. He began to study the Bible and was moved. He ended up coming to faith in Jesus. And 6 years later, that Egyptian businessman was ordained as a minister in the Coptic church. Became the pastor of a church just outside of Garbage City, ministering to the Zebulun and sharing the grace of God with them. God's grace makes givers out of takers. You experience the goodness of God in your life, and it has the power to transform you into someone that you were not. And so we come to this passage and you ask yourself, are you a giver or are you a taker? Is there a selfishness that drives your attitude toward others? Is there a sense in which it's all about me? It's all about what I can get. Is there a selfishness towards your time, toward your money, toward your resources, your talents? Consider how much Jesus gave up for you. Consider how much and how freely he gave of himself for you. And in gratefulness, invest your life in others. Be a giver and reflect the grace of God to all who know you. Let's look to him now in prayer. Father in heaven, we praise you that you don't give us what we deserve. Instead, you lavish your love and your mercy upon us extravagantly. Heal us of our selfishness. Make givers out of us. Help us to see the needs you want us to meet. And give us generous hearts to glorify you. For we ask you in Jesus' name.